Alright, boys and girls, here we go with Unit 8, Reaction and Reform. So we're kind of picking up the pieces of Europe after the French Revolution, and a lot of this stuff is kind of setting the stage for the 20th century, which would take us into World War I and World War II. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about Napoleon, nationalism, and the Congress of Vienna. This is a short unit with a lot of information, so again, watch the videos, get your notes done, look them over, answer the questions, etc. as we go through. All right. Napoleon. Here we go. One of the most interesting figures in history. Unfortunately, we don't spend a lot of time on him, so we're going to kind of give you some quick background here. Napoleon rapidly rose through the ranks of the military during the French Revolution. After seizing political power in France in 1799 through a coup d'etat, which is when he overthrows the government. Sometimes that's done peacefully or non-violently. Sometimes, somebody gets killed. He crowned himself emperor in 1804. Okay, so he was very popular, very savvy, knew how to play the game, so to speak. And again, the French government during the French Revolution was kind of a mess, so it kind of made it easy for him to kind of step in and said, "Let me do the driving," so to speak. After declaring himself Emperor of France, he tried to take over Europe. He could not defeat Great Britain, also known as England, and his invasion of Russia was a disaster. So more or less, he was unsuccessful in attempting to unify Europe under French domination. Between 1810, 1815, he kind of ran into some troubles, again, with building his empire. And by 1815, he was finally defeated in 1815, and Europe, because of his efforts to unify it under one flag, one empire, Europe needed resetting. Okay, and going back here, this is a very famous picture, painting of Napoleon, looking glorious and awesome, but this is kind of what it really looked like. Okay, cold, harsh. The mountains get pretty cold, especially over there. And again, invading Russia really weakened his army. And somebody else very famous would do that later on, Adolf Hitler, and that would be one of his biggest mistakes and kind of cost him the Second World War. So it'd be nice if we learned from our history from time to time, but hey, whatever. All right. So this is Napoleon's empire here. The French Empire, he tried to take over these places. The dark purple, or these pinkish purple, were allies of Napoleon. The light purple, places that he controlled. And then obviously Portugal and the United Kingdom, Great Britain, Ireland were against him. Okay, so he had pretty much most of Europe under his control, at least for a short period of time. One of the biggest legacies of Napoleon was his Napoleonic Code. Before his code, France did not have a single set of laws. Just a lot of laws were mainly local customs and privileges, very informal laws, things that could be changed and used as people suited to meet their needs. So when he finally organized the legal system in France, it was kind of a big deal. And his code established laws for many aspects of society: criminal law, civil law, property, etc. And the Napoleonic Code was adopted throughout much of Europe, or at least the places that he was able to conquer. And because of Napoleon, you had the rise of nationalism, which means the love of country and pride in one's country, and this started to grow. Nationalism was not widespread until after the French Revolution. Before, people were loyal to a city or a leader, not a nation. And nationalism grew out of the idea of popular sovereignty. And the state, or the nation, is created and sustained by the will of the people. Okay, so before, people were loyal to their king or queen, or maybe the Catholic Church or something like that. Because Napoleon did a lot of conquering, trying to unite it, a lot of people weren't really happy with that, and they wanted to kind of say, hey, this is who we are, this is our identity, etc. Rise of nationalism was a powerful force behind European politics during the 19th century, and you could say the 20th century as well. Widespread demands for political rights led to revolutions and legislative actions in Europe. So everybody was trying to establish their own country, their own laws, and some were successful, some were not. Economic competition also helped nationalism grow, okay? And that would come with capturing colonies, establishing alliances that benefit each other to make themselves richer. In 1848 saw nationalism led to unsuccessful revolutions throughout Central and Western Europe. Okay, so many years after Napoleon and the French Revolution, a lot of countries were still trying to establish their own governments that they felt were best for them. In 1848, quite a few revolutions took place in Europe, but were very unsuccessful. Make sure you know 1848. That's a SOL year. Which takes us to the Congress of Vienna. And the Congress of Vienna, its main goal, a meeting of European leaders to reestablish peace and stability to the continent after the fall of Napoleon. So obviously Napoleon did a lot of things to mess up the borders and boundaries of Europe, and this was the time to kind of hit the reset button on Europe. And this was necessary because Napoleon was defeated, and a lot of people were left figuring out, hey, which is this part of our land or is it part of yours? And that could lead to more wars, which they kind of wanted to avoid. There were three goals of the Congress of Vienna, and Vienna is in Austria, by the way. Prevent future French aggression by surrounding France with strong countries. So obviously at the time, France was the most powerful country in Europe, and they didn't want to see that happen again, so they surrounded France with countries that would be able to kind of keep it in check. Number two, this is an important one, restore a balance of power. Restore a balance of power so that no country would be a threat to others, and no one country can be too powerful. So it's kind of like checks and balances, if you will. They wanted to make sure everybody was even, and nobody was stronger than the other, because somebody might try and take advantage of it. Number three, restore Europe's royal families to the thrones they held before Napoleon's conquests. So they wanted to restore the old way. So they were kind of going backwards a little bit towards monarchies, kings and queens, even still using some constitutional monarchies, but they still, some people liked having a king, and it made it simpler. You didn't have to worry about debates and parliaments and things like that. Anyway, so those were some of the goals of the Congress of Vienna. All right, and so you had a lot of uppity, rich, wealthy, powerful Europeans kind of deciding, this entire continent and how it was going to be set up. And you can see here the empire of Napoleon, and then how it looked by 1817. Okay, a lot more broken up, looking more like the European continent that exists today, and still more changes to come, though, for sure. Key players at Vienna. The host was Prince Clemens von Metternich from Austria, Viscount Castlereagh from Britain, King Frederick William III from Prussia, Tsar Alexander I from Russia, and then Foreign Minister Charles Maurice de Talleyrand from France. Okay, and these were the key leaders that were really deciding how things were going to shape up in Europe after Napoleon. Unfortunately, two countries that were not really represented very well or got kind of left out of the discussion were Germany or the states of Germany and Italy, which we'll be talking about next class. So the terms of the Congress led to widespread discontent in Europe, especially in the Italian and German states. So Germany and Italy were like, hey, what about us? Aren't we important? Don't we matter? Apparently not. which takes us to a power struggle concerning legitimacy. Okay, rulers prior to Napoleon should be placed back on the throne and restore the monarchy. So that was another key part of the Congress of Vienna. Hey, let's put these old guys, let's put the kings, the rulers, back on the throne, which upset a lot of your middle class, your poor, your bourgeoisie, etc. So you had a new political map of Europe, and you had two new political philosophies that would really drive politics at this time. The first was conservatism, and those were who wanted to keep things the way they were. Conserve. Okay, keep it. All right, like when you conserve an animal, you try to keep it alive, or the way it is. They wanted to maintain the status quo. Classes stay as they are. So if you were rich, you were conservative. You didn't want things to change. Liberalism, those people favored liberty and equality, and they wanted representative government, not monarchies. Okay, so the people who fought for the French Revolution or the American Revolution, they were liberals at the time. Okay, a few other key things about liberalism and conservatism. Usually middle-class business leaders and merchants. Liberals wanted more power given to elected parliaments. Some key words: new, enlightened, left. Some key beliefs: French Revolution, science, reason, and enlightenment. All right, and then you have the conservatives on the other side. Usually wealthy property owners and nobility argued for protecting the traditional monarchies of Europe. In France, some were even willing to approve constitutional monarchies where power shared between legislature and the king. But again, kings kind of didn't go away when absolutism died or the French Revolution happened. They kind of popped back onto the scene during the time after Napoleon. Keywords for conservatives: old, traditional, status quo, right. All right, you can see this on the scale here. You got the left side, the right side. Key beliefs: obedience to authority, devotion to religion, and no representative government. All right, so this is obviously, these two sides were obviously going to clash somewhat peacefully, somewhat violently, to try and achieve what they thought was right for their country. So all this was happening in continental Europe. Meanwhile, off the continent, on the Isle of Great Britain, in 1832, Great Britain passed the Reform Law of 1832, which granted the right to vote for most adult middle-class men. Okay, so now middle-class men were getting the right to vote. Before it was just rich landowners. Then in 1833, Parliament passed a law abolishing slavery in British territories. So it seemed like the continent of Europe was trying to limit people's rights, but Great Britain was setting about to expand those rights for people, slowly but surely, I guess you could say. All right, so go back to the video if you need to, fill in things, and we will talk about the questions in class. See you then.